When you're drafting a running back for your fantasy football team, what is it you're looking at? Some people, all they care about is projected stats for the next year. Some people just want to see what the players did the year prior. But both of those ways are like eating Taco Bell and only having single-ply toilet paper available. Sure, sometimes it's gonna work just fine, but there's an even better chance that you're just gonna end up yourself. What is going on, Headliner Nation? Hopefully everyone's doing well out there, where we're going to be going through a deep dive of one of the things that I typically do when looking for running backs for my fantasy football team. But how do we know what to look at for running backs? Well, it's not some overcomplicated process. Actually, yes, it's very complicated. This research took me for damn ever to collect and go through. But let me explain it in a nutshell, right? We all want a stud running back on our team like a Christian McCaffrey. So let's just look at what Christian McCaffrey does really well, in what metrics he really performs well in, and just try to find some guys who are similar. Because not everyone can get Christian McCaffrey in the first round. We need some guys at some cheaper price tags that maybe have that opportunity of having a slightly higher ceiling due to where they finish in some of these metrics. Now, you may be sitting out there going, okay, Jake, what metrics do we look at? And the easiest way I can respond to that is all of them. I went through and gathered data on 31 different metrics. I know that is overkill AF. But before we get into the list of all the metrics and all the data that I pulled, can you do me a quick favor? We just created a new account over on X, Twitter, whatever it is you want to call it. For the longest time, it's just been our personal accounts, right? Me, Kyle, the doc, but now we have one for the show itself. And I think I speak for our entire team when I say we would greatly appreciate it if you could head over there and follow us on X. We actually just put a post up on there, and it looks like this. There's actually a link to it down below in the description. We're going to be doing giveaways on there throughout the entire year, but we want to do our first one right now. So if you want to be entered into it, head over to X or Twitter or whatever the hell you want to call it and find this post. Be sure to follow us on X, repost this tweet or whatever the hell it's called, and then also tag 5 friends as well. By doing that, you're going to be entered in to win a free 2024 fantasy football draft guide. I'll then pick a winner 1 month from today, which just so happens to be the 4th of July. Now, the team here seems to think that we can get this account to over 1,000 followers. That is a steep ask, but I know you guys, like all the time, want to try to find ways to prove me wrong, so let's see if you can make it happen. But once again, there's a link down below in the description. All right, back to where I left off, the metrics, and there are a ton of them. Here is the list of metrics that I went through for 2023. We have everything from games played, rush attempts, rushing yards per attempt, rushing yards per game, rush attempts per game, targets, red zone targets, receptions, receiving yards, receptions per game, receiving yards per game, receiving yards per reception, total touches, yards per touch, total touchdowns, yards before contact per attempt, yards after contact per attempt, broken tackles, touches per broken tackle, yards after the catch per reception, team run plays per game, red zone total touches, evaded tackles, touches per evaded tackle, breakaway runs, breakaway run rate, yards created per touch, average defenders in the box, stuffed runs, and fantasy points per game. I then took the top 43 fantasy running backs and ranked them all against each other in all of these metrics. They were then each given a score from 1 to 43, depending on where they finished in that metric. After that was complete, I totaled up all their scores for all their metrics. Now, when I did that, do you want to take a guess on who finished first? Yes, we've already mentioned his name. It was Christian McCaffrey, and he dominated. He scored 101 points more than the second place finisher. But he was also the highest scoring running back in fantasy football last year, so it kind of makes sense, right? Now, I wish I could show you this whole spreadsheet on the screen, but if I were to put it up on the screen, this is what it would look like. So let's make it a little bit easier for you to understand. Let's try to find the running backs who finished the closest to CMC when compared to all 31 metrics. And when we do that, here are the top 12 finishers at the running back position after Christian McCaffrey. We had guys like Breece Hall, Travis Etienne, Bijan Robinson, Kyren Williams, Jahmyr Gibbs, guys that you would expect to be at the top of this list. But then we also had the likes of Rachaad White, Jaylen Warren, Joe Mixon, Devon Achane, James Cook, James Conner, and Derrick Henry. But what we really need to look at are where are these guys projected to be drafted in 2024? We don't have multiple first-round picks or second-round picks to get a few of these guys. So who are some of the guys a little bit later that maybe we should pay closer attention to? So when we put up the ADP, we see Breece Hall in the first, Bijan in the first, Jahmyr Gibbs in the first. We know that. How about Etienne in the second, Kyren Williams in the second, Devon Achane in the second round as well? Those guys are going to be expensive. So let's take a look at the players who were drafted after the second round. So we've drafted our studs in the first and second round. After that, we need to try to find one of those running backs that has those similarities to CMC. So who does that leave us of these top finishers? We got Rachaad White in the 4th round, Jaylen Warren in the 8th round, Joe Mixon in the 5th, James Cook in the 4th, James Conner in the 7th, and Derrick Henry in the 3rd round. But this is where it gets pretty interesting because we need to go through each one of these guys and find out what do they have in common with Christian McCaffrey. And let's just start off here with Rachaad White, who we said was into the 4th round. But let's also bring up the metrics that he was super close to Christian McCaffrey in. We had rush attempts. They both had 272. How about targets? They were pretty close. CMC finishing 4th, White finishing 7th among running backs. Receptions, CMC finishing 3rd, Rachaad White finishing 4th, only 3 receptions behind. How about receiving yards? Just behind him as well. CMC had 564 yards receiving, White 549. What about total touches? We know CMC touches the rock a lot, 339 times. That was only 3 times more than Rachaad White just last year. How about red zone touches? They're pretty close. This one was the biggest difference. Red zone touches, CMC 79, first among all running backs. White at 46, but that's still top 10 at the position, finishing 9th. And then we had evaded tackles. CMC first in the league with 77, White 6th in the league with 66. So is this something that can happen again in 2024 for Rachaad White? Well, we do know they just brought in Bucky Irving, and he has an opportunity to take away some of that pass catching work. We also know last year's offensive corner, Dave Canellis, he's gone, he's in Carolina. Now, while this offense, for the most part, should be the same in Tampa Bay, I expect Rachaad White to get a bunch of volume again. Even if he takes a slight hit in that pass-catching upside, the dude's going to have the opportunity to score some fantasy points, and we're getting him in the 4th round. Hopefully, at a minimum, you're running back 2. Now, if you go heavy running back early, and he's your flex play, that's enough to get the eggplant excited. Personally, I would just prefer him not to be my running back 1. But then we move on to the next guy. It's Jaylen Warren with a projected ADP into the 8th round. He was super similar to CMC in rushing yards per attempt. CMC at 5.4, Warren at 5.3, only 1 spot between them. How about targets? CMC with 83, Warren with 74, both of them top 5. Receptions, CMC at 67, Warren at 61, both of them top 5. Evaded tackles, CMC at 77, Warren at 67, both of them once again, yes, top 5. But then we also have breakaway run rate as well. That's super hard for me to say. CMC 7.4%. Jaylen Warren actually beat him at 8.1%. Now, maybe you don't know what that metric is. That's the percentage of carries that result in 15 yards or more. That be them big plays, but can Jaylen Warren do that in 2024? Well, Pittsburgh has an upgraded offensive line. They're going to have improved quarterback play, whether it be Russell Wilson or Justin Fields, but then we also have new offensive coordinator Arthur Smith over from Atlanta. And I know I'm not the only one out there that really doesn't trust Arthur Smith, but he's always run the ball a lot. He ran the ball a lot in Atlanta. It wasn't just all Bijan Robinson. He ran the ball a lot when he was in Tennessee with Derrick Henry. Is he going to run the ball a lot here? I don't expect Mike Tomlin to let him get away with some of those shenanigans that we saw in Atlanta last year. At an 8th round ADP, I love Jaylen Warren to be some bench depth there for my fantasy football team at the running back position for sure. Which will then take us to Joe Mixon now of the Houston Texans with an ADP in the 5th round. This is probably going to creep up as the offseason progresses, but I don't see it getting inside the first 2 rounds, so we need to talk about him because he had quite a few similarities to Christian McCaffrey. Rush attempts, we know Mixon is somewhat of a bell cow running back, at least capable running back in the NFL. Both of them finished top 5 in rush attempts. Receptions, both of them finished top 9 in receptions. CMC with 67, Mixon with 52. Red zone targets, number 1 and number 2. CMC with 16, Mixon with 13. Total touches, CMC with 339, Mixon with 309. Yards before contact per attempt, CMC at 3.2, third in the league, where Mixon was 2.6. What is that? 0.6 away, finishing in the top 10 as well. And then we had red zone touches, CMC 79 first overall, Mixon 71 third overall. But now it's a little bit different, right? Those were his metrics in Cincinnati. Now he's in Houston, but he still has himself a 3-down role in this offense. It may sound crazy on the surface to even think about this, but Joe Mixon went to Houston but didn't join a worse offense than what he had in Cincinnati. He's going to have a 3-down role. He's going to have higher touchdown upside. He's going to have an opportunity at some check down passes. I really don't see Joe Mixon going backwards hardly at all. So in the 5th round, he's still a steal. He is someone that I would not mind him being my running back too if I can load up on some stud wide receivers early. But what about James Cook of the Buffalo Bills? He's into the 4th round. Super close with CMC in rushing yards. Right? I mean, CMC had 1459, led the league, but James Cook was 4th in the league in rushing. Not a lot of people really know that, with 1,122 yards. Receiving yards, we had CMC 2nd overall, James Cook at 7th overall. Cook had 445 yards receiving just last year. When it comes to receiving yards per game, CMC 35.3, Cook 26.2. How about team run plays per game? The San Francisco 49ers ran the ball the 10th most in the NFL, 29.2 attempts per game. Buffalo, 30.1 attempts per game, a little bit more in Buffalo. And then rushing yards per attempt, CMC at 5.4 and Cook at 4.7. Now, a lot of people are going to look at Buffalo and say, yeah, but they added Ray Davis and they added Frank Gore Jr. This offense is going to need to find some playmakers. We have a lot of expectations maybe for Dalton Kincaid or Keon Coleman or Curtis Samuel or Khalil Shakir, but they're going to need a solidified force in the backfield to open things up for those guys. James Cook has proven that he can produce when he gets touches. I expect him to get them once again here this season, which then takes us to James Conner in the 7th round. A lot of people don't realize how good James Conner was last year because he missed some time and his total numbers just took a hit because of it. Rushing yards per game, Conner was 4th in the league at 80 yards per game, where CMC was 2nd at 91.2. How about rush attempts per game? CMC at 17, Conner at 16, right behind him. Evaded tackles, CMC was 77, Conner with 58, both of them inside the top 10. Breakaway run rate, CMC at 7.4, Conner at 6.3, both of them in the top 10 there as well. But Arizona did just go out and draft Trey Benson out of Florida State in the 3rd round. I would not be surprised to see that young kid get a little bit more of a role as the season progresses. We already know that James Conner is not the model of perfect health. He gets beat up almost every single year. Now, when he's on the field, he produces. But if he misses any time and the young kid gets an opportunity and can do something with it, we could see James Conner start to lose some touches down the stretch. I mean, it's the Arizona Cardinals. They're not going to have a ton of leads, and where they're running so much, they can really supply 2 guys in this backfield. While I don't mind James Conner, at least drafting him in the 7th round, maybe utilizing him the first few weeks of the season, he is definitely somebody that I will look to trade before season's end, before he breaks down, hopefully trying to avoid that injury and really capitalizing on the value that you could get from him. Which then only leaves us Derrick Henry with a 3rd round ADP. When it comes to rush attempts, we know it's King Henry, right? 280 last year, he finished 1st, just over Christian McCaffrey's 272. Rushing yards, McCaffrey was 1st, Henry was second. Rush attempts per game, CMC was second, Henry was sixth. Total touches, we know Henry's going to be in the top 5 just like CMC. And then breakaway run rate, CMC at 7.4%, Henry at 5.7%, but now all bets are off. Derrick Henry is in Baltimore, one of the heaviest running teams in the NFL. Gus Edwards is gone. J.K. Dobbins is gone. Lamar Jackson slimming down a little bit. I cannot imagine Baltimore wanting Lamar Jackson to go out there and take those added hits in the running game when you have Derrick Henry in the backfield. Now, sure, Lamar's going to run at times. That's never going to stop. But when you have someone like a Derrick Henry that can rack up volume, plus the touchdown upside, plus an offense that really doesn't have a ton of stud weapons, Derrick Henry could absolutely eat once again. And if I can get him in the 3rd round this year, I'm going to do it. You really got to just remember, it's important to think outside of the box when you're playing fantasy football. It's not cookie cutter. You can't just look at some weird projections for the upcoming year and expect them to be correct. We all want stud running backs, so let's find out what the studs do well and try to find guys who are similar to them at a cheaper price. Are there any players that we talked about in today's episode that you can find yourself looking at very hard during your fantasy football draft? But before we get out of here for the day, if you haven't hit the like button yet, please do so, and then consider subscribing if you haven't. If you haven't, why the hell not? Don't you want to dominate all things fantasy football in 2024? If so, you found yourself a home right here, so hit that subscribe button now. But I'm going to go ahead and get out of here for the day. Hopefully you guys enjoy the rest of your day, and then most importantly, do your part to make the world a better place.